We all know, or have at least heard of, the young, brooding actor James Dean, known for the movies Rebel Without a Cause, East of Eden, and Giant. He was a rising star, but a tragic accident took his life on September 30th, 1955, and a successful career was cut very short that day. But James Dean had another passion besides acting. He loved racing, and this love of amateur road racing led Dean to purchase his Porsche 550 Spyder, which was dubbed Little Bastard. And Little Bastard is an unsettling story within itself. Well, hello there. Welcome back to another night filled with tales of terror. How's everyone doing? I hope you're all doing great. I hope you're all gearing up for tonight's story, which is about James Dean and the infamous Little Bastard, his Porsche 550 Spyder, the one that he was driving when his life was tragically cut short at the young age of only 24 years old. Now, while you're listening to this story, you may find yourself questioning whether or not what you're hearing is true or not true, and here's where I'm going to ask that you wait till the end of the video so that we can all find out together. So with that, I want to ask you to go ahead and please click the like and subscribe buttons for me. That way YouTube knows to continue to put out content just like this, and it really does help me out a lot. Now, turn down the lights, get comfortable, and let's begin. On February 8th, 1931, Dean was born to Mildred Wilson and Winton Dean in Marion, Indiana. By all accounts, he had a normal childhood and did well in both academics and athletics. But for reasons I'm unsure of, Dean's father decided it was time to give up farming and become a dental technician, and he moved Dean and Mildred to Santa Monica, California. Shortly after, Dean's mother Mildred became terribly sick and died from cancer. Dean was only 9 years old when this happened. And to make matters worse for young Dean, his father decided to send Mildred back to Indiana to be buried. He also put an unattended young Dean on the train to Indiana as well. Winston did not accompany his dead wife or his 9-year-old son on the train ride back to Indiana, but instead stayed in Santa Monica to continue his career as a dental technician. He did make arrangements for Dean to live with his sister, Dean's aunt and her husband, and when Dean graduated high school, he moved back to California. He attended Santa Monica College for a bit, studying law, but then transferred to UCLA and began studying theater, landing a role in Macbeth, which further heightened his interest in acting. It was in 1951 that Dean dropped out of UCLA and began pursuing a full-time acting career. At the beginning of Dean's acting career, he got a part in a Pepsi commercial and some walk-on roles in movies such as Has Anybody Seen My Gal and Fixed Bayonets. Then his first speaking role was in Sailor Beware with Dean Martin and Jerry Lewis. Dean stayed pretty busy parking cars at CBS Studios all the while pursuing his acting career, and that is where he met Rogers Brackett, a radio director and agent who gave Dean advice and guidance that would open the door to a major Broadway role in the play See the Jaguar. Following these roles, Dean's career would take flight with roles in East of Eden, Rebel Without a Cause, and his last movie, Giant. With a passion for acting, Dean was becoming a rising star, performing both in theater and on the big screen. But acting wasn't Dean's only passion. He loved fast cars and racing. He once said, "Racing was the only time I felt whole." And with these words, I believe this only solidified his decision to not only further his acting career, but his racing career as well. With a growing passion for racing, Dean pursued amateur racing, which he was quite good at. He purchased a Triumph T10 and a Porsche 356 Super Speedster and went on to race in the 1955 Palm Springs Road Races in Palm Springs, California. He placed first in the novice and second in the main event. He also joined the SCCA, the Sports Car Club of America, and with a few races under his belt, Dean was on his way. However, knowing Dean's passion for racing and the dangers that came with it, and for insurance reasons, Warner Brothers compelled him to suspend any racing endeavors until he had completed filming the movie Giant in 1954. And when the words "It's a Wrap" were announced, Dean was ready. With Dean just having completed filming the movie Giant, he was preparing to return to the racing scene. He traded his 356 Porsche Super Speedster for a new Porsche 550 Spyder, which was one of the 90 ever made. It was silver with custom fiberglass paneling, and he had the number 130 painted on the hood and the name Little Bastard on the back, the name he'd given to his new car. It was a car that Dean was truly proud of. However, there were some that didn't share Dean's love for Little Bastard. Days before the fatal crash, Dean showed his new car to fellow actor Alec Guinness. Guinness recalls seeing something ominous in the car's aura, like it gave off angry, sinister vibes. He said to Dean that he shouldn't get in that car and that if he did, he would be dead in a week. Dean simply laughed off Guinness's concern, and little did Guinness know at the time that he was making a chilling prediction that would come true. On September 30th, 1955, 1 week later, Dean, along with his mechanic, Rolf Wutherick, were preparing to head out to the Salinas Road Races, where Dean would be introducing Little Bastard into the races. The plan was to drive Little Bastard from Hollywood to Salinas so that Dean could break in the engine and get a good feel for how the car handled before racing it. So, at around 3:30 p.m., with Dean behind the wheel and his mechanic Rolf Wutherick riding shotgun, and with Dean's racing crew towing Little Bastard's trailer behind, Little Bastard was on its way to Salinas, California, but not without a few stops first. While in Bakersfield, Dean was pulled over and cited for speeding. Shortly after, Dean and his crew made a stop at Blackwell's Corner on Route 466 for drinks, meeting up with Lance Robert Lau and Bruce Kessler, a couple of other fellow racers headed for the Salina Road Races. At around 5:15 p.m., Dean and his crew were all back on the road once again, making their way to the races, and about 30 minutes into the drive, while driving at 85 miles per hour, Dean collided with another driver, Donald Turnipseed, a Cal Poly student. As it turns out, Turnipseed had just made a left-hand turn in his Ford sedan, putting himself right in Dean's path. Dean tried to avoid him but couldn't. With Little Bastard taking the brunt of the collision, Wutherick, not wearing his seatbelt, was ejected from the car and survived. Turnipseed also survived. Dean sat trapped inside of the completely mangled Little Bastard as the emergency crew pried him out with a crowbar. When they freed him from Little Bastard, Dean and Wutherick were placed in an ambulance and driven to the Paso Robles War Memorial Hospital, the closest hospital within a 30-mile radius. And can you believe this? While on their way to the hospital, the ambulance got into a car accident. They did make it to the hospital, but sadly, Dean was pronounced dead upon arrival. According to his death certificate, he had a broken neck, a fractured skull, broken jaw, legs, arm, and internal bleeding, among other injuries. Little Bastard was declared a total loss and sent to a salvage yard, but that would not be the end of it. Do you remember the original Batmobile and the hearse for the television show The Munsters? They were designed by a man named George Barris. Well, Barris bought Little Bastard's wrecked frame and body. When Little Bastard's remains arrived at his shop, it slipped off the trailer and broke his mechanic's leg. Shortly after that, the storage area Little Bastard was being held in inexplicably caught on fire, which was said to be pretty extreme. But Little Bastard seemed to be untouched by the fire. After that, Barris, along with the Los Angeles Safety Council, arranged an exhibit featuring Little Bastard as a traveling display for road safety. This took place at a local high school. Unfortunately, another incident involving Little Bastard occurred while being observed by several students. Somehow, Little Bastard fell from its display and broke the hip of a young student. I think Barris was beginning to sense something that was possibly sinister in or with Little Bastard, and that's about the time he began to sell off its parts. A man named William Eskridge, who knew Dean from racing, purchased Little Bastard's engine and put it into his Lotus 4 race car and gave the transmission and suspension parts to his friend Troy Lee McHenry, who also raced cars. Just 11 months after Dean's death at the 1956 Pomona Road Races, both men crashed their cars, the ones with Little Bastard's parts inside of them. Eskridge survived. McHenry was not so fortunate. He slammed into a tree during his first lap. The crash was fatal, killing him instantly. And something to note, his car was also a Porsche 550 Spyder. But something else occurred with Eskridge. While driving his car, the one with Little Bastard's parts in it was making a turn when the wheels locked up without any explanation, causing his car to roll. He was critically injured from this unexplainable accident. Then, 2 of the surviving tires on Little Bastard were sold by Barris, who even installed them onto the car of the guy who purchased them. Now get this, while driving home, both tires simultaneously exploded, causing the car to go out of control. Fortunately, no one was harmed from this incident, just another weird coincidence. Once again on tour, a truck driver by the name of George Vargas was hired to transport Little Bastard to the exhibition. On the way, Vargas was involved in a car accident and was ejected from the truck, landing him on the side of the flatbed carrying Little Bastard. And this is so mind-blowing. At the same time, Little Bastard slid from the flatbed, crushed Vargas, and killed him. In 1960, Little Bastard was once again on display, this time in an exhibit in Miami, Florida. When it was on its way back to Los Angeles, the truck that was transporting it was involved in an accident which turned out to be fatal for the driver. Since then, the whereabouts of Little Bastard are unknown. As of today, nobody knows where Little Bastard or its sold-off parts are. And Dean's mechanic, Rolf Wutherick, suffered a lot of psychological torment after the accident. He did eventually take a position with Porsche as a mechanic and did some racing himself. He too would end up in a tragic car accident and, just like Dean, would die from his injuries. James Dean became the first actor to receive 2 posthumous Academy Award nominations in 1956 and in 1957 for his roles in East of Eden and Giant. Well, okay then. So what are your thoughts on this story? Do you believe that James Dean's Little Bastard was truly cursed, or do you think that it could have just been a string of coincidences? I can tell you, based on all of my research, that everything that you heard today is based off of true events. So you can take that as you wish. I wish I could give you more than that. Anyway, it's looking like it's time to say goodnight, but before we go, I just want to ask you to please click the like and subscribe buttons for me if you haven't done so already. Then to prepare for more tales of terror delivered to you weekly here on my channel, Scary Girl Griffin. So until next time, stay safe and stay scary.